Hi guys, good morning. It is a beautiful morning here in New England. I just realized I sound a little froggy. Usually in the morning my voice is a little more like that. You guys like that? It's just a morning thing for me. I'm excited. I actually told you guys here on Instagram, I don't know how many days ago, that I had this idea for this set of workshops. And I immediately was like, oh, I really want to share about this, and got excited. And then I realized, I looked at my schedule for next week and I realized I only had 2 days next week that I could do a live. So I'm thinking about this yesterday and I decided, okay, it might seem weird, but the only time I have on Sunday is at 8:30 in the morning, and I'm just going to do it. So we'll see if this is a time that works for you guys or not, but I'm hoping. If you received an email from me yesterday, then you are on my list. You requested the schedule for these workshops, and I will keep you updated via email. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and you'd like to have a schedule for what's going on in the next 2 workshops, and if you'd like to get any information that relates to things we're talking about today, and when the series of workshops is done, I'm going to send out replays of all the videos. So if you're interested in all of that, please just comment dehydrate, and I will make sure that you get all of the above, because I don't want you to miss it. So tell me, comment, say hi so I know you're here, and hi guys. Let me know if it's harvest time yet where you live. I'm surprised that already in New England I am overrun with garden harvest. It's a little earlier than usual for us, and I think it's because I changed a few things I was doing in the garden that really upped the game and upped my yield. I'll be talking about that more in the weeks or so ahead. So if you're interested in knowing about that, just be watching here on Instagram or over on YouTube. But for whatever reason, I am like overrun. And it's funny, somebody replied to my Instagram story a few days ago. I forget, I showed maybe it was in my insiders group. I showed all the tomatoes on my table, and that wasn't the point of what I was showing, but it was, I couldn't help but, like, if you're gonna be in my kitchen, you're gonna see these piles and piles and piles of tomatoes. And somebody replied, isn't it great? I love this time of year when there's so much good food in the kitchen. And I said, yes, but it's kind of hard to find my table. Like, it's a really great time of year, but it's also a little frustrating. And the biggest frustration is, what are we going to do to preserve this food? We don't want it to go bad. So I used to get so upset with myself that I hated canning as much as I did. I don't know why. I was convinced that that was the best way to preserve my food. In fact, I was really, honestly, not the best way. I was convinced it was the way. Like, I didn't really think there were other options. Like, yeah, I knew you could put it in the freezer, but I mean, that takes up freezer space. Who has that much freezer space? And who really wants, I don't know, some things frozen just aren't good, right? But I really thought that was my only 2 options. I mean, you could also put it in the fridge and take up a whole lot of fridge space, but it only keeps there for maybe a week, right? And then I did discover fermenting, and that's something else I talk a lot about. I absolutely love fermenting. It has a big place in my heart, but it's very limited as to what foods I want to ferment. And it's very limited for its storage space, in a couple different reasons. But I'm not talking about canning, not talking about freezing, not talking about fermenting. Let's stay on track, Michelle. I love dehydrating. I didn't know it would be so versatile. I didn't know it would be so easy. I didn't know it would take so much less time than canning until I really invested in it. Because here's the thing. I tried, guys, by the way, tell me, are you overflowing in harvest right now? Is there anybody else out there like this, dealing with this, that you can't see your kitchen because of the food? I tried twice over the course of almost 2 decades. I tried to dehydrate, and I was miserable with it. The results were awful. And it was actually 2 different machines I was using. I had a feeling the first time it might have been my machine. Even at the time I knew it because it was one of those cheapest you can get, but I didn't have the funds to buy anything else. And that was actually given to me. But it was one of those, I think it's called Necco, I'm not sure. Round, you know, that has the stackable trays, the plastic ones. It was awful for so many reasons. I won't get into that anymore. Maybe we can talk about that in a future workshop about choosing your dehydrator. But I do have the schedule set, by the way, and that wasn't on it. So let me know that too, as you're listening. If there's other things that cross your mind that you would like to see covered in the next couple workshops. So I thought it was me, that I hated canning. I thought I was just kind of weird because, you know, I was watching on social media. Back then it was just Facebook, but I was watching on social media and I was seeing people loving it and all proud of all their jars lined up. And I'm going, I'm not. Yeah, I'll do it, but I just kind of hate it. And I also thought it was me, that dehydrating was like a flop. I just thought, not going to be able to do this. And I had no idea what to do with the food after I dehydrated. If it ever did turn out successful, which I think it was like maybe once, I didn't know what to do with it. So once I really invested myself into it, and the reason I did that was 2020. I realized I need to be able to preserve food, and I just can't stand canning. Like, I dread it. Knowing that it's coming up even like a week from now, I dreaded it. Like getting the jars prepared, making sure I had my supplies, making sure I had enough lids, and getting my recipes ready. I just hated it. So I knew I needed something else. So I decided I really need to invest in dehydrating because other people seem to be kind of getting it. I need to figure it out. But that was my other problem. Nobody was talking about dehydrating. I didn't think it was a legit option, but I thought, there's got to be at least a few foods I can do this way instead of canning. That was my goal, to just find a few foods that I could dehydrate instead of canning. Okay, fast forward to the Michelle of today. And this is what today's live is actually about. I'm going to share with you, hi everybody. I wish I could say hi to everybody. I'm just so bad at like understanding what the Instagram handles are. But I'm really glad you're all here. I have a list of reasons. I know I'll forget some, so I actually have a list. Why I personally think dehydrating is the best way to preserve your food. Because if you're joining in, I have an assumption that maybe you're a little like I was years ago. And maybe you just don't get dehydrating. Maybe you don't see many people doing it. You don't really think about it much. I want to convince you that it is such a great way to preserve your food. Because it was kind of life-changing for me. I'm now a person who likes preserving food. I'm a person who gets excited about growing more and more food because I know I can preserve it relatively easy and I know what I'm going to do with it. I planted 92 tomato plants this year, more than I ever had, because I wanted more and more tomatoes, because I love making dehydrated tomato sauce. We're definitely going to talk about that in a future workshop. Okay, so why? Why is it the best way? First of all, it takes up almost no space. Actually, I had a little show and tell. I grabbed a few things and I didn't grab what I really wanted. And I'm not sure where it is right now, so I'm not going to go grab it. But I have a jar of green beans that I dehydrated. And it's a quart jar. This is not green beans. This is my oregano. But it's a quart jar of green beans. And the green beans are, you know, this little, but it's a whole green bean. And when you rehydrate it, you know, it's this big. It's 5 meals for our family in 1 quart jar. So that alone was mind-blowing to me because we have a root cellar. I feel very blessed with that. We have a small house, but we have a pretty large root cellar. So I have the room for the jars, but I was kind of concerned about the weight of the jars because they have all that liquid in them and all the food. The quart jar itself has some weight to it. So that I could take 5 of them and replace it with 1. And on top of that, this jar is so much lighter than one of those 5 that I canned the beans in. That got me excited. So the space alone is a reason, but the fact that it's lightweight is another reason, because you can have all this dehydrated food stored away on a shelf and it's so light. You're not going to have any of those problems. Have you ever seen these pictures? I have. They make me cringe, where people show their canned goods that have collapsed the shelf and the shelf is broken and all the jars have fallen and there's glass everywhere and all that wonderful food that they spent so much time preserving is gone because their shelves couldn't handle the weight. because it can get really heavy, right? So that's the second reason. The third reason, I realized, back to my oregano, that I could do this even though I had a pretty crappy machine at the time that wasn't seeming to do what I needed it to do. I started with herbs, and I realized I don't need to use the machine for that because you can air dry them, which is what I do soon. Another couple weeks, it'll be time that I can start air drying. And by the way, I'm excited. Tomorrow I'm releasing, the doors are opening to Dehydrating Academy. Everything we're talking about in these workshops is just a tiny little speck of icing on the big cake. And I have spent 2 years putting all of my thoughts, my tips, my tricks, my insights, what I've learned, my time-saving steps into one place, into Dehydrating Academy. And the doors are opening tomorrow. And I explain in there how to decide when you're going to air dry or solar dry or machine dry your herbs and your other food. But aside from that, aside from the when and the how, it got me excited to realize I didn't need equipment at all. Like, at all. I could dehydrate my food without spending money on equipment. Have you looked at the price of a pressure canner? They're kind of crazy. So that got me excited. The fourth reason is that this food is shelf stable. I did find a few things that I could freeze. I actually, people laugh and don't believe me when I tell them this. I have 4 freezers. One of them is attached to my fridge, so that maybe doesn't count, but I have 3 standalone freezers. We're pig farmers and we have a lot of meat and we have to be able to have a lot of freezer space. So my point is, I did have the space that I could figure out how to freeze some things. And I really enjoy them, but it's a limited number of things. And it kind of stinks that it takes up all that room in the freezer the entire time until you finish the food, right? So to know that dehydrated food is totally shelf stable. These are peppers that I dehydrated. And for 2 years or longer, they're going to be amazing. And I don't have to worry about putting them in a refrigerator or a freezer. They're totally shelf stable. That's a really good selling point for me with dehydrating. Another really cool thing, guys, this isn't really the best example because this is my tomato powder. But like I said, we'll definitely be talking in an upcoming workshop about this amazing stuff. This stuff, this alone, if this was all I accomplished with dehydrating, I would feel like a millionaire. I get so excited about this. So we'll be talking about this. Don't miss the upcoming workshops. Make sure you comment dehydrate for that schedule. But let's pretend it's not tomato. Let's pretend it's liver or broccoli or spinach. Things that have amazing nutrients that your family members might not want to eat. You also might have picky eaters who just don't eat well in general. But if you can dehydrate those kind of superfoods and make a powder out of it that tastes good because you're adding some amazing little spices too, right? And you can sprinkle that on any meal and they're getting all those nutrients. Wow. But that leads me to something that I probably should have started with. When you dehydrate, I don't know what number this is now, 5 maybe, of reasons I love dehydrating. When you dehydrate, you are getting almost 100%. Studies vary from like 97 to 99.5% of the nutrients. And the reason the studies vary is it depends that you can pre-treat, you can do a few things that do release the nutrients some, even the way you store it. If you're storing it in direct light, you're going to lose some of your nutrients. But for the most part, when you dehydrate your food, you are getting almost 100% of the nutrients. So these peppers, when I grew them in my garden, and right now in this jar, have the same amount of nutrients in them. Like, that's mind-blowing, especially when you find out that according to numerous USDA studies, canned food has lost 60 to 80% of its nutrients. So when I learned that, and I'm going to all that effort, and I hate doing it, and I'm losing all the nutrients of the food anyway, I'm going, there's got to be a better way. Anybody with me on this? Hi guys. Lots of people joining. Nobody's telling me about if it's harvest time yet. Is it time to start harvesting all the good food growing in your area? Okay. Another reason You can dehydrate parts of the food that you normally wouldn't eat. Remember I mentioned broccoli? You can make broccoli powder from the stems that you would be throwing away. So it costs you zero amount of money. You're getting 100% of the nutrients of that broccoli, and you're eating the part of it that nobody else is ever going to eat. It's going to go into the trash, and you're making amazing high nutrient seasoning with it. Wow. You also can use food that you might reject. I would never recommend getting bad food and thinking, oh, it's okay, it's bad, I'm going to dehydrate it. Because you're never going to improve the quality of your food by dehydrating it. If you use yucky food, it's going to be yucky when you rehydrate it after you've dehydrated it. But there's a lot of food that I just don't like the texture once it's reached a certain ripeness, like bananas, for instance. I love the flavor of a really, really ripe banana, but I hate the texture of it. And then I learned I can dehydrate it. I can make banana chips that are amazing snacks. I love them. They're so good. And it's a banana that I wouldn't have wanted to eat to begin with. Like, that's just one of many things that you can dehydrate that you otherwise might wind up tossing. A couple more things on my list. I love that there's zero waste. When you're making a powder like this tomato sauce powder, you can make exactly the amount you need or you want for that evening or that meal. You get used to your portions. You know exactly how many tablespoons of the powder, how much tablespoons of water to make enough sauce to cover your spaghetti for that dinner. And there's nothing left over. I hated it. This was like an ongoing problem I had. I would use spaghetti sauce. I'd open up a jar. We'd use 2/3 of it. I'd put it in the fridge. And 6 weeks later, I recovered it from the recesses of the fridge and it had mold on it. I wasted 1/3 of that jar. It doesn't happen with dehydrated powders at all. You use exactly the amount you want. Okay, guys, I just looked at the time. I actually have to be somewhere at 9 o'clock, so I gotta run. But I hope that you come in and dehydrate if you would like to get that schedule. I will send it to you. And you know what? I will send all of this list kind of abbreviated to, if you missed it or if you didn't quite hear everything, you can get that list too. If you just comment dehydrate, and I'll send you the schedule for the upcoming workshops. Let me know if you have specific things you'd like to see covered. And thanks so much for joining me. Have a fantastic rest of your Sunday.